And by the way, there were lots of sleepless nights. Like, let's get it really straight. I've got no income. I've got credit cards like going through the roof. I was pawning jewellery on Hatton, true stories, pawning jewellery on Hatton Garden to like just pay for stuff in my life. Kim Kardashian, right? Kim Kardashian could not have produced or created what she's created without Instagram. Couldn't happen. So why should the same theory not apply for me in real estate? I mean, it's incredible what's happened over the last 2.5 years. Like, we all get stopped on the train. It's like my little moment to feel like a celebrity. Like, you're the guy on the videos, or you're the guy with that absolutely revolting attitude to work from home. Like, that's me. We got really lucky. Whatever. Right, I'm going to say what. Right. So what happened was,
welcome to the People Property Place podcast. We're going to kick off the podcast in a slightly different way today, and I'm going to tell you 2 truths and a lie about our next guest. Some of you who know the man will be able to nail it in one, but others who haven't come across this mover, shaker, innovator, and leader will, by the end of this podcast, have the measure of the man. So, 2 truths and a lie. Outspoken real estate social media sensation, raging work from home advocate, or minor midtown celebrity. Shaun Simons is the founder of Compton, a best-in-class London City Fringe District commercial real estate agency that takes an enterprising and collaborative approach to leasing, capital markets, and occupational services. He started his career in 2000 as a negotiator, built and then exited his first business, Hatton Real Estate, to Colliers International in 2016, and along with founding partners Elliot and Michael Rabin, set up Compton in 2021. Shaun, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. What an introduction, by the way. Great introduction.
Well, look, we'll find out which of those 3 are a lie, no doubt, by the end of this conversation. But look, Shaun, you've had a fascinating background, a really unique route into the industry, and one that lacks a degree, APC rotations, letters, and convention. And I'm really excited to get stuck into how you've been able to do what you've done, and of course, what your views, opinions on the market and where Compton is going moving forward. So, in traditional style, can we start off with how and why did you get into real estate?
So, as you've correctly said, my introduction to real estate was slightly different. I left school at 16. I was basically asked to leave. So I did my GCSEs at school, but had the call up about a week before my GCSEs. My mum and I went to see the headmaster, and there was no place for me in the sixth form because I just wasn't very good at school. I then went to sixth form college for 6 months, hated it, and wanted to get into the big wide world. I was that guy, just to make it clear, I was the guy in the playground at like 13, 14, buying and selling mobile phones. Like, I was always this kind of, had this dealer mentality. My father was an antique silver dealer. I'd kind of grown up in this very kind of brokerage environment. So for me, staying on in education, it was never really appealing. I never really had the desire to go traveling or go to university, let alone do my A-levels. So yes, I mean, I've got to where I've got to in my career with basically 0 qualifications. I mean, I don't even count my GCSEs because I only took 6 and I failed 4 of them. So it's a real kind of different journey to most. But property wasn't where I started. So I obviously had lots of jobs as a teenager. Again, I used to work in the Greasy Spoon in my house, peeling potatoes on a Saturday. At one point, I was making coffees in David Lloyd for 6 months during the summer. So I'd always had this kind of mentality where I liked working. But when I left sixth form college after literally 6 months, I actually spent a day in stockbroking. So a friend of my stepfather had a really successful stockbroking business. Went to see him. He said, well, listen, why don't you come in and kind of do a bit of experience with us, see if you like it. I lasted a day. Sitting behind a computer wasn't really my jam at all. So that kind of lasted a day. And then fortunately, my dad had a friend who had a commercial, residential and management business based in Marylebone. He had just sold his management and residential business and he was looking for a junior to run or to help him on the commercial side. And I took the job. It was £6,000 a year, plus commission. I was given a corner office on the corner of Marylebone High Street and Devonshire Street. And I literally thought I was the bee's knees.
And how old were you?
I was 16 at the time. As I said, earning £448 a month after tax. And yeah, this was the kind of beginning of my career. And I always kind of look fondly on that because I was right at that junction before computers, mobile phones were a thing. So I turned 40 this year. I am actually getting quite old. But for the first six months of my career, I didn't have a computer. I relied everything on the fax machine, which again, as we progress later on through my career path, has been a really kind of important learning for me at that stage. So in terms of quick storyboarding, I was at WL Commercial, which was my first job, for about 18 months. I was thrown into the deep end, literally thrown into the deep end. Here's a phone. Here's the estate agent's clearinghouse, because it wasn't on email at the time. It was a wad of kind of sheets. The phone will ring, try and put some deals together. It was literally that. Most of my friends and most people who look back on their careers, they'll talk about their first deal. Most people's first deal would be, I don't know, 300 to 500 square foot office or a little shop somewhere. My first deal was a 9,000 square foot warehouse behind Bayswater Tube Station, which I let to a limousine company. And this was literally a case of, I took an inquiry from a random person, I put two and two together and I made this kind of deal happen. And that was kind of the first deal that I did. I spent 18 months at WL Commercial, and whilst it was brilliant, there was a moment. I remember we were selling a building in King's Cross, and I was standing on the roof, and I must have been almost 18 at this point. And I've got these developers who are coming around the building talking to me. And I remember having this kind of moment of self-reflection where they were asking me about what I do and how I do things. And I'm like, yeah, I can do this, and I can do that, and it's retail, no problem, industrial, no problem, offices, I could do all of it. And I kind of had this moment of reflection. I thought I really remember it. I was like, what am I doing? Like, I am literally like the jack of all trades here. I've got no specialism. I've got no direction. I'm scattergun. I'm all over the place.
You'll just be like following deals and following opportunity and trying to...
Any opportunity. I was doing I'm completely unqualified to do it. I was doing a rent review down in Kent, but it was all self-generated business. As I said, I was given a phone and a wad of paper and a stack of details and basically told to get on with it. There was some support from the guys I worked from, but it was 80% of it was off you go and do your thing. But as I said, after about 18 months, I had this moment of self-reflection. I'm like, I'm a jack of all trades. I'm kind of quite wide boy type mentality in the kind of way I'm dealing with things. It's just not what I wanted. So I remember at the time when you actually used to read the EG hard copy, and it wasn't on kind of LinkedIn or social media, but they had the job section at the back. And I saw this advert for a West End agent. It was a company called Collins Commercial. The guy who ran it was a guy called Paul Collins, who's probably been the most influential person in my whole career. So I saw this advert, made the application, got called in for an interview, went to the interview. And at the end of the interview, he said, I was 18 at the time. He said, you are not really what we're looking for. He said, really, we want someone kind of with good West End experience, 5 to 10 years worth of experience. And I was kind of there with 18 months of just scattergun experience. Anyway, kind of running story short, he offered me the job. So 2 days later, I got a call saying, listen, you're not what we're looking for, but we've seen something in you. We'd like you to come and join the company. So I handed my notice, accepted the job, turned up on my first day. And I love this story because it's really kind of shaped the person who I am today. Thought, first day of my job, I should impress. I'm going to turn up at 7:45. My hours of work are 8:30 till 6, but I'm going to turn up at 7:45 and really impress everyone. Walked into the office feeling really proud of myself, expecting to see no one. The whole office is there. And I was greeted with a good evening remark. And there's me thinking I was early, and they were all taking the mix saying, you've turned up late. Now I get into the office at 6:30, well, latest 6:30 every day. And it was from that moment that kind of shaped we'll come into that again more as we talk. So I then worked for Paul. Paul was an amazing kind of human to work for because the work ethic, focusing on things like attention to detail. And he also gave me a skill in one sector, which was fundamentally office leasing. So rather than being kind of very scattergun in my approach, it was very, very focused on the central London office leasing. And I spent an incredible 4.5 years there, which was amazing. But I just kind of, not that I outgrew it, because I didn't. It just, well, maybe I did outgrow it. It just wasn't enough for me anymore. I needed more. And it was funny. We were selling a building on, I always have these kind of moments where we're selling buildings, but we were selling a building on Cavendish Square on behalf of the Howard Award. And it was a pretty good, we were selling it on behalf of a private individual on Cavendish Square. And I did a viewing with Richard Susskind, who brought the Howard Award on to come and view the building. And I did this viewing with Richard. And at the time, my best friend, a guy called Ricky Blair, who was my partner, he called me after the viewing. He said, "What have you just done?" I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Richard's just come back to the office. He wants to offer you a job based on the viewing you've just done with him." I was like, "Wow." I said, "That's a bit weird." I said, "Funny enough, Ricky and I had always for years had this dream of working together, having a business together, and this kind of perhaps presented an opportunity."
And Ricky worked with Richard?
Ricky was already at Richard. So anyway, got called in for the interview, did the interview, got the job, accepted the job, left Paul, which was a really kind of sad moment, but it was the right thing for me to do at the time. And then I joined Richard Susskind. And this was kind of the beginning of my City Fringe journey.
Before we get into that,
Yep.
Having been in property for a little while, did you ever think about doing your APC or getting rotations or doing a degree part-time? Was there ever that pressure or expectation on you at that stage?
There's been one moment in my entire career where I thought about it for 45 minutes and then said no. When we joined Colliers, again, we'll come on to that, they offered us an opportunity to effectively fast track it and basically go to
the experience route.
The experience route and go and do it. But not that I'm against it. I'm not against it. And actually, for anyone starting their career now, you've got to be quite careful kind of listening to what I'm saying, because I started my career in the year 2000, launching your career, trying to do a similar path to me in 2024 is not that straightforward. I do believe it's possible. I mean, businesses like myself or Compton do make it possible for non-qualified people to hit stratospheric levels in their career without a degree or without an APC. But listen, it's a bit like age, right? As far as I'm concerned, age is a number. Okay, I remember in the early part of my career, probably between the ages of 16 and 24, I would never tell anyone my age, ever. And if I was asked for it, I would do everything in my power to avoid answering the question truthfully, because people do, I think unfairly, categorize or give an opinion on someone based on their age. And by the time I was 24, I was giving advice that was leading to millions of pounds worth of money being spent based on the advice I was given. And I would kind of question myself as to, would I listen to a 23-year-old who's telling me to spend £10 million? Maybe, maybe not. But I think as I've got older, and what I've probably appreciated for having run a few businesses is age is just a number, right? If you're good enough, you're old enough is very much my mentality. And I think the same applies when it comes to qualifications. Listen, we are not doctors, right? We're not lawyers. We're not brain surgeons. There are elements of what we do that requires a certain skill set or a qualification to qualify you in order to do the work. But for what I do, which is fundamentally out and out brokerage, I personally think it's a complete waste of time. Personally, that might anger a few people, but it's a nonsense, I think.
Let's pick the story up at Richard Susskind. So you joined your mate Ricky.
Well, I met Ricky and also met Mike Rabin, who we worked out over the weekend that it's now almost 20 years of working. It's our 20th anniversary, which is astonishing in itself. Mike hated me the day I walked in. Mike had been there for about 7 years by the time I got there, and I was kind of this new guy, best friends with Ricky, and I think he probably felt a little bit threatened at the time. I mean, obviously that lasted about 2 minutes because the relationship has kind of gone on incredibly. But joined Richard, and again, circumstances kind of were quite fortuitous. So I joined Richard, and at the time there was a kind of a 3-tiered structure. You had Richard that owned the business. You then had Stephen Page and Chris Antonio. And then you had myself, Michael, and Ricky. And that was the kind of the chain of command. Within 6 months of joining, Stephen and Chris both left to launch their own business called Anton Page that's kind of gone on to do kind of really good things. And then Richard kind of said to us, well, I'm going to go out and recruit a couple of guys. We're like, whoa. Please don't go and recruit anyone. At least give us the opportunity to kind of step into their shoes and kind of do the business. And if we can't do it after 6 months, go and employ someone or go and employ a group of people. But for now, we believe we're capable of filling the roles that those guys left. What's also interesting is this was kind of around 2008 at this point now. So this is we're now in it, and obviously the financial crisis. So we did what we said we would do. We kind of stepped up. We kind of took on the responsibility. We took the bull by the horns, and we kind of grew into these new roles. And as a result, instead of Richard employing people above us, he employed people below us, and everything was brilliant. Then life got a bit serious. I was getting married. I know Mike was in the process of getting married. And when you work for a small niche business, I mean, it was a 6-man business. When you work for a business like that, and a lot of the business one is generating is off your own back, unless you're part of the action, it's very, very difficult to kind of stay there. So we went to Richard, and the three of us asked to be cut in on the equity. We negotiated a deal for about 9 months and reached an agreement, which we thought was a great deal. We still stand by. It would have been a phenomenal deal, especially what's happened since. But on the day of signing, Richard decided that it wasn't a deal he wanted to do. We were upset, but also respectful that it was his business. And whilst, yes, we thought we were on the road to agreeing this deal that would have benefited him and us in equal measure, it was a decision that he made not to do, which we had to accept.
How long were you at the business before?
5 years.
So you were there 5 years, proving yourself before you kind of proposed that.
Well, as I said, we left. I left after 5 years. We started negotiating around just after 4 years. So I'd been there 4 years. Again, during the financial crisis, really difficult market. We performed brilliantly, and it was the right time. As I said, I was getting married. I wanted a family. And as I said, working in that kind of environment where a lot of the business that I was now generating was self-generated, why am I giving 90% of everything I earn away when I could probably do it for myself and not? But as I said, we thought we'd agreed a deal that would work for everyone. Our vision at the time, you may not remember, but there was a business called EA Shaw at the time. And our sell to Richard was that we wanted to convert. They were a Covent Garden specialist covering three different disciplines: residential, management, and commercial. And our vision to Richard was, we want to turn your business into the EA Shaw of the City Fringe. We want to put a modern twist on it. We want to do things differently. We're the future. We're all kind of in our late 20s. Trust us. We're going to make this a big thing. Anyway, for one reason or another, he didn't want to do it. And as I said, full respect for that. But we had a meeting on the Friday with his accountant where we thought we were signing the documents. That never happened. We ended up leaving the meeting pretty disgruntled, going on a 3-hour walk, and on Monday serving notice. So that was that journey.
So what happened over that weekend? What were the conversations?
So context is really important here. Okay, so we're now 2010. We're in the eye of the financial crisis storm. I've just bought a house I couldn't really afford to own. I was paying my mortgage partially on my credit card. I'm getting married in the December, and I'm about to serve notice and not have any income. Great look. But listen, in our view, we had no choice. We didn't have a choice. We could either stay under the arrangement that Richard wanted, or we had to take a risk. And the view was, we're taking the risk. So we served notice on the Monday. We had no idea what we were doing. We had another name. We had no idea. So we left. We ended up going, within the first week, we went to see 2 of our trusted clients. We told them we were leaving, and we asked them for their help. And we needed help in terms of, we needed money. So both clients agreed to give us £60,000 each. So we had £120,000, and the view was that would be enough to get us an office, build us a pretty shitty basic website and kind of get us moving.
And was that on a debt basis or an equity basis?
So no equity. We were not prepared to give any equity. It just wasn't something that we ever felt comfortable doing. It was on a debt basis. The deal, they were friends. They were friends and clients. So the deal we did was 3 months interest free. And then after 3 months, there'll be, I think it was 1 or 2% higher than Bank of England interest rates. And that was the deal. We paid back the debt within 6 weeks in full. And by the way, there were lots of sleepless nights. Like, let's get it really straight. I've got no income. I've got credit cards like going through the roof. I was pawning jewelry on Hatton, true stories, pawning jewelry on Hatton Garden to like just pay for stuff in my life. And I know it all sounds very dramatic. I mean, it didn't feel as dramatic at the time, but I think looking back, as I said, I had a lot on my plate. Just bought a house, getting married, set up a business, no cash. But as I said, I did a deal within the first 6-7 weeks of launching the business. We bought a portfolio of 3 buildings in Old Street for Threadneedle at the time. It was 27.1 million. And we got paid a big fat fee and paid off the debt, and then kind of started to grow the business and recruit all of our team.
Phenomenal. Was there any issue with non-solicitation or solicitation, and how did you kind of dance around that? Because that seems to be a bit of a hangover, no doubt, and we'll probably come on to that later.
We got really lucky. Whatever. Right, I'm going to say what. Right, so what happened was we had contracts with Richard. Which were proper contracts with non-compete, solicitation, all the things you'd expect in an agency role. About 3 months before this whole situation happened, Richard employed an outsourced HR company, which lots of companies do and understand why you do it. Anyway, when we did that, they kind of onboarded us as part of the staff. We had to sign all these contracts, and I never knew what they were. It was just like a single sheet of paper. Cut a long story short, it was basically like a Starbucks contract, right? It was a contract which you get in like a retail shop. It had nothing around solicitation, no non-competes, no restrictions on anything. And when we went to see our lawyers, because we thought we were going to be in the garden for 3 months. That's what we thought was going to happen, and non-solicitation for 6 months. And we took in, Ricky brought the file of all the contracts, and we looked at the contracts. He's reading the contract. He's like, yep. You can't talk to a client. You can't work for 3 months. Can't talk to any client for 12. You can't even open an office within a mile radius of the office. And we're like, it's a disaster. Anyway, he gets to the end of it and he sees another piece of paper. He's like, hold on. He's looking at these 2. Anyway, one was obviously dated from when we signed. One was dated about 3 months ago. He's like, what's this? And we said, oh, well, the HR company got us to sign it. He's like, oh, well, this supersedes that.
Yeah.
Off you go. You can start tomorrow. And we were like, okay. So, bit of fortune. Luck. Listen, you do need luck. You need luck with whatever you do. But you kind of got to make your own luck. And listen, it was a big call. As I said, the context of things I've explained, plus the fact you're in one of the biggest recessionary environments man ever created, with the financial crisis and the meltdown that ensued. And we kind of took the gamble. So yes, we were lucky, but we created a situation that allowed that luck to present itself.
Talk to me about the Hatton. You've obviously touched on the first deal you did and kind of getting up and running. Talk to me about the evolution of that business and what came after that.
So again, conveniently and coincidentally, within about 6 months of us launching our business, David Cameron stood in the middle of Old Street roundabout and said, welcome to what we're calling Tech City, which is going to be the equivalent to Silicon Valley in San Francisco. And we were like, oh my God, like what is about to happen here? And it just went bonkers. All of a sudden, huge amount of investment started to pour into the location. Bear in mind, by the way, like again, for context, prior to that happening, the City Fringe was kind of the armpit of the London districts. It really was. I mean, the building quality was rubbish. The rents were low. I mean, we used to earn fees in the early part of my career based on the greater of rent or service charge, to put it into perspective, because in a lot of cases, the service charge was more than the rent payable.
Wow.
There was very little capital investment into the products. The infrastructure was pretty dreadful. There was no retail leisure offerings. It wasn't a great location. But then David Cameron and the government at the time kind of made this pledge for the city, Old Street in particular, to become this kind of beacon of technology for growth. And then it all went mad. And I think I've said this, I did another podcast, I spoke about this, but it's a story worth repeating. It's one of my favorite stories. It's really the thing that kind of, Hatton was doing fine, right? We kind of created this kind of cool business, doing things differently, but we were kind of punching at the level that you'd expect a 5-person niche business to punch at. We were kind of doing 5K lettings, 7K lettings, loads of 1s and 2s, but we weren't doing the big stuff. Sitting at my desk one Friday afternoon, get a call from an agent who I hardly knew at the time, a guy called Dan Byrne, who at the time was at JLL, now RX. He said, "Hello, Shaun, you don't really know me, but I'm walking around Old Street with a client of mine. I know you're a local expert. Can we come and have a chat?" So I was like, "Sure, come and have a chat." So he comes up, it wasn't him, it was him plus 6 other people. And I've got a 4-person meeting room. So we all sit in our 4-person meeting room, everyone's crowding around and they're like, "Tell us about the location. We need you for 10 minutes. 2 hours later, or an hour and a half later, they all leave. I still had no idea who they were. I had no idea what they were talking about or what they wanted me to talk about, but I just sat there and I spoke to them about the City Fringe for 2 hours. Didn't think anything of it. A month later, I get a call from Gerald Kay, who's hella cool. He said, "Hello, I'm the chap who you came to see you. We were very impressed with what you had to say about the location. You're passionate about it. We've just bought the BT headquarters at Old Street Roundabout. We'd love you to pitch." So I said, "That sounds exciting." Knowing the BT building is like a couple 100,000 feet. So I'm like, wow, this is interesting. So I said, "Will you send us a pitch format?" And by the way, we'd never properly pitched before, especially for something of that scale. We've done kind of pitching, but not on that scale. So we were like, "Joe, well, this is about as big as it gets for us," right? It was proposed to be a 320,000 square foot office campus in Old Street Roundabout. I'd never dealt with anything like that. The biggest building I'd probably ever dealt with in my career to that date was about 30,000 square feet.
10 times, 11 times
11 times the size. So we went for it, right? We decided to throw some money at the pitch. I think at the time, bear in mind, we're still a relatively new business, not flush at all. And I remember I think we threw 20 grand at the pitch.
Wow.
So we created this incredible kind of coffee table book and obviously a video to accompany. And it was done very, very differently. So day of the pitch, it's Mike and I. We rock up to, it was a JV between Helical and Crosstree. Rock up to their HQ in Mayfair, sitting in reception, waiting to go in, nervous. And it's just me and Mike. And with that, because it was a conveyor belt, it was one in, one out, one in, one out. So as we're about to walk in, we see coming out CBRE. I mean, there must have been 10, 12 of them. Boards, easels, big A4, like A3, A1 documents. And we're like sitting there with a laptop and just me and Mike. And I looked at Mike, I was like, we're fucked. Anyway, went into the pitch.
Flush that 20 grand down.
Well, no, exactly. So, but we went in and we're like, "Joe, let's just give it some." I remember saying to Mike at the time, "It's like, we've got nothing to lose here. Let's just give it some." Did the pitch, which we thought went well. It was a passionate pitch. I mean, there was lots of standing up and walking around, which we never normally do, but it just it all just took over. And anyway, we left, and sitting in the reception was JLL, again, for like 12 of them with God knows what apparatus for this presentation. And we left, we were like, "Listen, we're not going to win that. There's no way. Like, there's just no way. We're a 12-month-old business, not even. We've got no track record. We've got passion and understanding about location, but I just can't see it happening." So we kind of put it down to a good experience and kind of left. We then got a call a couple of weeks later. It was I think at the time they did it as a conference call with Gerald and Crosstree. And they said, "Listen, guys, like, thank you for coming to present." They said, "Listen, we've got to be honest. Like, when we put you on the team sheet, you were kind of there just to make up the numbers a bit. We had 10 people pitching, but we wanted to hear what you had to say. And I've got to be honest, you were the last people we put on the list to pitch. You were the first people we put down in terms of people we wanted to work for. Congratulations, you've won the mandate. And that moment was the game changer. We went from dealing with 30,000 foot buildings at our peak to 320,000 square foot campuses. And that wasn't the beginning of Hatton, but that was the moment where it flicked.
And did it flick in terms of previously you're dealing with retail investors or individuals who had buildings there as part of their pension or charities or to being more like, right, we're in the institutional game now?
So what happened the David Cameron moment changed a lot. All of a sudden, institutional money wanted to be part of the story. Then you had people like Helical developing 320,000 square feet. You had Derwent doing the one opposite. You had Resolution doing Alpha Beta. And all of a sudden, like, the snowball was growing. And you know what it's like in the property industry. Once someone does something, everyone wants to kind of jump on the bandwagon. And literally within a 3-year period, our client base went from the proprietors of the buildings that used to occupy the building or private individuals or small-time property companies to fully PLC and institutional grade. So we went from kind of the Mr. Cohens and the Mr. Shahs and the Mr. Joneses to Standard Life, Threadneedle, Helical, Derwent, Land Securities. And it was a transformational moment. So again, we didn't create the change in the Fringe. We were just in the right place at the right time, offering a service that I think was a pretty unique one at the time, because Hatton was, I don't love the word, but I like it when I talk about myself with it. But we were a kind of a bit of a disruptor agency at the time. We just did things a bit differently. And I think that, coupled with our experience in the market and our local knowledge, was an offering that no one could really compete with.
So fast forwarding, so I want to spend a bit of time on Compton as well, and just getting through this next period. You decided to exit the business to Colliers. Can you just talk to me about that that period?
3 years in, so we're now dealing with really big mandates. We've got our name in headlights. Kind of everyone knows who we are. This kind of Hatton Real Estate. They are the niche city fringe experts, and they're dealing with all the stock. All the big firms all wanted a piece of it. So all the big firms traditionally focused on the West End or the city, Docklands, Canary Wharf, but no one really wanted our location until everyone started investing in it. So we had an approach. I think the first one through the door was CBRE. So we got a knock on the door from CBRE. Would you like to come talk to us about us potentially acquiring your business? Sure, absolutely. Went to see them. They wanted to make a proposal. I strategically opened my mouth in a busy place that we'd had an approach. Within 2 weeks, we'd had lots of approaches from lots of different companies.
Deliberately, was that calculated?
Yeah, totally. Yes. And by the way, we'll come on to my ethos, but a lot of what I've done is self-learning, but we'll come on to that.
Yeah, that's questions I've got in the bank.
But tactically speaking, yes, absolutely. I want to create a competitive situation. Why would I sell to one person? I want to do a competitive situation. So we ran this process, myself, Mike and Ricky, independently. We had no advice, we had no help. We weren't even engaging with a lawyer. We were negotiating these things ourselves, which, to the benefit of hindsight, is an absolute lunacy, but we did it anyway. Anyway, we got to a place where we'd been negotiating with 5 different parties for about 12 weeks. And we got to a point where we asked them all for their best and final positions, which they made. And we had a meeting at my house on a Sunday evening to decide whether we want to sell the business or we want to carry on. I was outvoted. I wanted to sell. I was desperate to sell.
Because?
I wanted the money. I think, listen, we weren't still, even though we've got this kind of 3-year-old business, coming from paying my mortgage on my credit card, pawning jewelry, paying my mortgage on my credit card, to all of a sudden I was blindsided by numbers. And I just wanted to do it. Just like, guys, 3 years ago, we had nothing. Now we're being offered a meaningful amount of money. It's time to go. Anyway, I was outvoted. Very rarely happens. I sulked for a bit, but then we all kind of kissed, made up, rolled our sleeves up and got on with it again. But what's funny, Ricky was always the kind of the unsung hero in our sale, because he was not really out there facing. He was kind of the internal guy. He did deals, but he ran the business. He did a presentation to us about 2 or 3 months after we declined all the offers with effectively a business plan as to how we're going to sell the business one day.
Because you didn't have a business plan beforehand?
There was
There was
no business plan. We never, until this point, we'd never had any form of business plan whatsoever. It was just, let's just see what
Go and do
happens.
some deals.
Go and do some deals.
Knock it out of the park.
And earn some money. So Ricky came up with it. It was a 72-page document. We sat in my house again on a Sunday night, went through the document. He gave us targets to hit, things we wanted to do, new departments we wanted to open, scaling the business. And cut a very, very, very long story short, 2 years later, I bumped into Paul Smith at a drinks evening in the West End. He said, we tried to buy you a couple of years ago. Would you be open to doing it now? I said, fine enough, we probably would. A few days later, I met Tony Harrell from Colliers. And 3 months later, we sold our business to them. And the amazing part of the story is when Ricky did his 72-page presentation, at the last page, he put the number that we were going to sell for. And I think we were within about 150K of the number that he predicted.
Amazing.
And then we sold to Colliers. So that's the kind of the Hatton journey.
So you've always been niche and you've always been entrepreneurial. You're joining a massive global machine in Colliers. That must have been a massive culture shock.
Yes and no. Yes and no. Everyone told me I was going to hate it. I was probably the one of the three of us that loved it the most. Genuinely, I really, and I'm not saying this for the camera, I think you know that I will speak my truth, but my truth is I thoroughly enjoyed working there. I was a bit of a kid in a candy shop. Bear in mind, the biggest company I'd ever worked for was my own. There was Hatton. At the time of point of sale, it was 12 people. I'm now basically 30 years old, to early 30s. I'm a senior director in a global organization of 17,000 people. This was a great opportunity for me. So all the things that I perhaps didn't learn through education, I really learned at Colliers. And I'll talk about my college journey, but the one thing about the 5 years at Colliers that I learned, I wouldn't say Colliers gave us much from a deal perspective because we kind of generated that ourselves. But what Colliers did give me is they made me a better businessman. Like for me to kind of have that kind of visibility onto big business has definitely improved myself as a businessman, as someone who, whether it's dealing with clients or dealing with our own growth, the way my brain works now is very, very different to how it worked prior to that 5 years at Colliers. So I really enjoyed it. And we also had a pretty unique situation. We had our own office. We had our own P&L. We were in charge of our own hiring and firing. And we kind of ran our department kind of in the way that we'd always ran Hatton, because we kind of said to Colliers at the time, I said, first of all, we've got to stay in the geography. We can't be a niche agent working out of City or the West End. Doesn't work. And also the culture that we've created within our business is not something that we're prepared to lose, because the culture is part of what makes us great. So yes, we worked for Colliers and I enjoyed working for Colliers. We got all the benefits of working for a big firm, but day to day, we were Hatton, just with a Colliers name above the door. It was the same people in the same office.
I was going to say, on the people side, normally when a business exit, there is a little bit of churn or a bit of movement.
No.
Did you have any of that?
No, no, none. No.
They were loyal with you through that and understanding of the exit and the reason.
Yeah, I think people were surprised. I think people were shocked, but not surprised, I would say. No one really saw it coming. We did a really good job of keeping it quiet. And it wasn't that we were trying to keep secrets from everyone. It was more just, it's an incredibly sensitive situation. There's stock markets involved. There's client management to deal with. And it was just something, unfortunately, we weren't able to disclose until it was done. And it was kind of, hi guys, welcome to Colliers. And I think there were a few people that were unsettled, but as time progressed, I said we had this autonomy, and I think autonomy is the apt word here. Yeah, we had autonomy that I think is a pretty unique proposition when businesses like ours get bought, because normally they get bought and they get funneled into a bigger machine.
Yeah, and the whole essence of why they've been bought just gets destroyed. People
Correct.
Start leaving and the value's eroded.
Whereas we managed to shape a deal. We basically said, listen, you can buy us, right? You can give us all this money and do this, but if you mess with us, you're going to turn this into a bad deal.
Yeah.
You've got to give us the freedom to behave and run our team how we want to run our team.
And credit, they
did
that right.
Totally.
You were at Colliers for 5.5 years?
Yeah.
Something like that.
I honoured my contract.
You honoured your contract. And tell me about the decision to leave and set Compton up. Because if I'm not mistaken, you actually didn't want to leave.
I didn't want to go.
You wanted to stay at Colliers.
Yeah. So yeah, I really did want to stay at Colliers. So part of one of my long-term ambitions is, I know it sounds ridiculous, but I really want to be the CEO of a big property services business in London. We can come on to that later, but that as part of my career path, I really want to be the CEO of one of these big businesses in the future, because I feel that if you can Comptonize, Hattonize, or put a modern thought process onto quite an old-fashioned business, basically you do what we've done at small level, at scale, I think you're onto something pretty enormous. And I believe that there's people that can unlock that. I believe I'm one of those people that could one day, as part of my career journey, unlock that. That wasn't the reason for wanting to stay there necessarily. I just felt we were onto a good thing. We were onto a really good thing. I enjoyed working for a big firm. I enjoyed having contacts in America who I could pick up the phone to regarding occupational demands in the UK. I liked having a PR department, an HR department, a rating department, this department, that department. I just enjoyed it. But the pandemic kind of got in the way of that deal becoming a reality. We were prepared to stay. We had deal terms that we were prepared to stay at, which to all intents and purposes was the same deal they cut us first time. We just wanted it again. We kind of took the view that you bought us for 5 years, buy us again for 5 years. It's not that I don't think they believed in that, because I think deep down they probably could understand the value. But given we were in literally the eye of the pandemic, where revenues were down, obviously, and it wasn't just London. It was, if you think about the guy who owns Colliers, he hasn't just got a problem in London, he's got a problem in every single country in the world. Why am I going to go and offer these guys loads, like another opportunity when I've got all these problems around the world? It was just the wrong moment. Had we have had that conversation prior to the pandemic, maybe the outcome would have been different, but we dealt the hands we were dealt. So we negotiated with Colliers about staying. This kind of went backwards and forwards. It started before the lockdown. So it started pre-lockdown. We then paused because obviously the pandemic hit and chaos ensued. And then we picked it up after the lockdowns and the chaos had ended. And the irony was we served notice. I'm trying to get my timelines right. We basically served notice on them in October. After we'd come to the conclusion that we were not going to be able to do a deal with them. So we served notice. Mike and I literally called my wife on the way to see Tony to say, listen, I'm going to be home by lunchtime. I'm serving notice. I'm going to be in the garden for 6 months. I'll see you at lunch. I'll pick the kids up from school and do it every day. I can't wait. Served notice to Tony and he sent us back to the office. Oh, that's a bit peculiar. It was bizarre. So we went back to the office, and anyway, we then didn't hear from Tony about the topic until mid-Feb. And we're sitting there thinking, this is a bit peculiar.
Like, where do you stand? You know, you're trying to do this day to day, got an eye on the door.
Yeah, well, yes and no. I mean, given that we always knew there's two things. One, we're not shithouses, right? So we had huge amounts of respect for Tony, for the teams we worked with, and for the wider business, and we didn't want to kind of create a bad exit. That's the truth. The second thing is we always knew we were kind of going to be re-entering the market. So if we started to lower our performance, our client base currently is our future client base. We can't show them a lack of commitment. Anyway, so went to see Tony mid-Feb. We're like, listen, Tony, we're leaving in 6 weeks. Like, what's going on? What are you going to do? Like, who's going to run the team? What's going to happen to all the staff? What are you going to do with the office? I said, it's kind of your responsibility now. We're done. We're 6 weeks. We're going to spend some time with our families and we're going to go again. Anyway, cut a very long story short, we ended up cutting a deal. Mike thought it was the impossible deal to pull off, but it wasn't, because not that we had the upper hand, but we had that time period allowed us leverage. And that leverage allowed us to negotiate a favourable exit. And I say it was favourable. I think Colliers got a good deal out of it. It suited everyone, but there was risk. So we spoke before about risk when we left Richard Susskind. There was a similar risk when we left Colliers. So the deal we did with Colliers was we will take over the P&L. We'll take over the cost of the staff. At the time it was, I think, 15 or 16 people. We'll take over the responsibility of the office and all the costs associated with that. All the staff, as I said, will pay you a proportion of our revenue for a period of time. Now, the risk there, you may think that's a genius deal. And in exchange for all that, we got let off our non-competes and restrictions. That was the deal. That was the trade. On paper, that sounds brilliant. What an amazing deal. But at the time, this was March 21. So we're a year into the pandemic. Our revenues were virtually zero at this moment in time. No one was letting office space, especially in the City Fringe. So we're sitting there thinking, it's a great deal, but if we don't start producing revenue quickly, this is not going to last very long.
Because you'll break your covenants or you'll break part of the deal?
No, just because we can't afford to keep it. So myself, Michael and Elliot took the view that, right, we're going to seed this with 6 months' money. So we all put money in to basically keep the business afloat for 6 months in the hope that from the 1st of April, at some point in the next 6 months, the tap will turn back on again. But we were losing money every month in the lead up to that. Our cost base was here, our revenue was here. So we were taking on a loss-making business, all the overheads associated with it, at a time in the market where there was virtually no activity.
Did you have confidence because you've done it before? Or was it a case of you've done it before and you knew what the risk was, and so you were even more risk averse, a couple of kids at that stage, a bit more stability?
It's a really good question.
Not in your nature?
It's a really good question. Listen, I had the stability of, listen, when we sold, again, context is important. When we sold Colliers to Colliers, it's never what I would call fuck you money, right? Fuck you money is when you don't have to work. You can do what you like, you're carefree, you can do as you please. It was never that. It was a meaningful amount of money that took certain pressures in my life away from me. But in answer to your question, did I have a stack of cash that if it all went wrong, I could fall on and be fine? Absolutely not. I was dipping into basically 90% of what I'd saved in order to keep this business going or to set up this business in the hope that the market, and by the way, it wasn't about our quality, how good we were. We were in the pandemic, right? Being an office leasing agent in a pandemic where no one's acquiring offices, and then there was pressure on work from home, all this kind of narrative, it was a risk. Anyway, fortuitously, we set up on the 1st of April. I would say around mid-May, beginning of June, the wheel started to turn again. And again, we're about to celebrate our 3rd birthday. We've gone from 15 to 25 people in the last 3 years. And it's again, it was a big risk because of market conditions and the amount of, we were basically 3 guys funding a business that was making no money. If anything, it was losing.
Talk to me about the name Compton, how it came around, and then what the ethos and premise of the business was.
There's no romantic story around Compton. The first one was Hatton Real Estate. We basically decided that we wanted one word, not 3. Look at all the biggest brands in the world. They're all one word: Apple, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Nike. Single word. The word Hatton came from the fact that myself, Michael and Ricky all started working together on Hatton Garden, and it was quite a cool name. Had the Hatton bit of that. And honestly, one night we're struggling for names. We were genuinely struggling for names. And we're like, what are we going to call it? What are we going to call it? So I literally went on Google Maps and I'm scouring the whole City Fringe, just looking for a name that sounded quite cool. And I saw Compton Street, which is literally around the corner from our office. It's like, Compton, that kind of quite a cool name. Called Mike, called Elliot, and locked in Compton.
Done.
And it just
check
worked.
The domain.
It just
Happy
worked.
Days.
It just kind of worked. We also at the time, we knew it wasn't just going to be a commercial property agency. We knew we kind of had this ambition for a restaurant or a coffee shop or something at the time. And we wanted a name that would be transferable into different offerings that we may look to do either now or again in the future. And Compton just kind of worked.
So I assume this time round you had a business plan and...
No.
No?
Not listen, what we we're not business plan people. Okay. Whenever we talk about business decisions, we use football analogies. It's the way we try and make sense of the things we're doing. So whether it's a recruitment role, we'll use parallels in the football world. So do we need a striker? Do we need a defender? Let's talk about the squad. Have we got strength in depth here, or do we need to? Everything's always a football analogy, but we don't have. I said between the three of us, there's basically no A-levels, no degrees, nothing. And everything we've done has been very much learnt on the job. So do we have a document detailing the Compton business plan? Absolutely not. Do we know what we're doing? Categorically, yes. Do we have a plan? Categorically, yes. But not in its...
You're not led by the spreadsheet.
No, we're led by... Honestly, we rely on the data that we create for ourselves, and also gut feeling. Like, gut is the thing that's kind of been my guide ever since I was 16. And as I said, the gut feeling when we had that weird, awkward meeting with Richard Susskind, the gut was, we got to go. And my gut served me correct then. When we had the situation with the sale of the business, again, I mean, my gut actually got it wrong first time, but I'm big enough to admit that. The other two's guts were right. We ended up selling the business to Colliers after initially rejecting them, by the way, for double what they'd offered the first time. So they were correct, mine was wrong. When we left to set up Compton, again, it was a big call for all the reasons that I've explained, but gut feeling was we have to give it a go. So gut is the guide.
What is your take or your USP or your MO when it comes to the DNA of the business in your view?
It's multi. First of all, there's a work ethic. Like, we work incredibly hard. Like, we talk about culture quite a lot, and the culture that we've created is work. I mean, work hard, play hard, to be fair, but I would like to think that ourselves as people that kind of everyone's looking at kind of setting the pace. There are very few people, I think, who work as hard as us. And by the way, by extension, since launching Compton, we brought in other we brought in other partners. So within
Kyle,
Carl, who kind of is a partner of the business, leads the investment department. Dan's come in to deal with the occupier services, again, a partner in the business. So I would say that between the five of us, there is a kind of a work ethic and an understanding that we will kind of want everyone to follow it. But I think I used the word disruptor before. I mean, we have just tried to do things differently. So if you imagine Hatton was the first iPhone. So, and if you imagine when we set up Hatton, this is the analogy that I'm going to hopefully make work. Before Hatton existed, you had Nokia and Motorola phones. And then when Hatton started, we were the iPhone. We did everything that everyone else did. Make calls, receive text, we do deals, we let space. We just did it in a different way. We made it more visual. So I remember seeing details from the big firms that were dealing with 50,000 foot mandates that have black and white details with one photo. We were dealing with 3,000 square foot mandates. We were having 10 photos, all colour, and we were doing videos. So we were marketing 3,000 square foot products better than the corporates were marketing 50,000 square foot products, right? So that was our USP. Our USP was we do everything that everyone else does, but we just do it in a more innovative way. The difference between Compton and Hatton, or Hatton and Compton, is Hatton was the iPhone 1, Compton's the iPhone 10. So we're now looking to raise the bar again, which, by the way, is much more difficult as we're learning, because the growth that we did between setting up Hatton, which was 2010 to 2016, it was really easy to be different. No one was using social media. No one was doing video marketing. No one was kind of doing things differently. But fast forward to 2021, when we launched Compton, everyone's doing it. Right? Everyone is doing proper marketing collateral. Everyone's putting video content together. Everyone's doing their thing like we were doing it. So how can we just got to be better than everyone. But I'd like to think we are doing it more innovatively than everyone else.
So you still do your videos, you still do your walkarounds, you get very creative, bringing in sheep or various other props.
Yep.
But it's not just about marketing real estate, it's marketing the space and the lifestyle and Compton culture.
Where agents get things wrong, or surveyors think they're surveyors. They think, and they are. They're there to give advice. They're there to lease the space. They're there to hold the client's hand through the entire process. Absolutely right. And we do that. We may not be qualified surveyors, but that's what we do. What everyone seems to forget is that you're not just there to let space. You're there to market the space as well. And the theory of, we're going to put together loads of marketing collateral, we're going to send it out to the market, and then we're going to wait for the phone to ring. Like that's not our mentality. We are super aggressive in the way we go about transacting deals. We know the line, we don't cross the line, but we're aggressive in the way that we kind of go and win work and then kind of process that work. But also the kind of the social media element. I think that's probably been the biggest change for us as Compton. So one of our sayings at Compton is property is a people business, make it about the people. And I think for too long, people in the commercial property world have hidden behind the organizations they've worked for. I think people have been scared to perhaps have an opinion or show who they really are. I mean, it's funny, I post a lot, as you know. I think we originally met through probably LinkedIn. I get really good view counts. I mean, I get really good engagement on my posts. I seem to kind of spew a narrative that kind of people kind of buy into, at times controversial, but kind of that's social media, so be it. But what's really fascinating is when I open up about myself on social media, and I may talk about one of my experiences or something that has always bothered me or something that's personal to me, the view count is like tenfold, right? The engagement is like tenfold. Now, just because we deal with commercial property doesn't mean we shouldn't be kind of behind the lens, like we should be in front of it. So think about, I mean, I use this analogy, it's a terrible one, but Kim Kardashian, right? Kim Kardashian could not have produced or created what she's created without Instagram. Couldn't happen. So why should the same theory not apply for me in real estate? I mean, it's incredible what's happened over the last 2.5 years. Like, we all get stopped on the train. It's like my little moments for like a celebrity. Like, you're the guy on the videos, or you're the guy with that absolutely revolting attitude to work from home. Like, that's me. And there's loads of hate that goes with it. And listen, I think the thing with social media is if you're going to be part of it, you've got to accept the good with the bad, and you've got to have at times some quite thick skin. Fortunately, I have that. But quite frankly, property is like the agency world. It is somewhat of it's not even a popularity contest, right? But people buy into people. Okay, so when you sell if you owned a building, you wouldn't care whether, I'm going to give you a generalization here, but let's say you had CBRE and JLL both come to see you, right? They're both big international firms with big teams. They can do all the things that you want them to do. You're going to decide who you run with based on who you like or who you think can get the job done, not on the brand they work for.
Correct. As long as the commercials are similar, as long as what have you, and other bits
are the same, you're going to go with the person you not like the most. Because, by the way, there's plenty of people that instruct me on buildings that I know don't like me.
But they respect you.
Well, they know I'll get the job done, or they know we will get the job done. So it's not a popularity contest. It's about the person. So whether someone likes you or dislikes you is irrelevant. It's whether they believe you can get the job done. And I'd like to think that the way Compton promotes itself on social media, the way I promote myself on social media, whether you like me or don't like me, that's cool. But I don't think anyone will doubt our ability or my ability to get what they want done. And that's the change, and that's the difference. I know when I was at Colliers, I had to be careful what I was posting, but what a nonsense. Again, I say in meetings with big corporates, unfortunately, we're not allowed to have an opinion. Happy days, like, that's great for us. If you can't have an opinion,
gives you the platform.
It's one less person I've got to worry about.
I think you've absolutely just obliterated the two truths and a lie within that that monologue there. But can we just talk about Compton today, the service lines that are within the business, and then I want to come on to your rather unique kind of recruitment, retention,
the two actually work
piece.
The two go quite hand in hand. So, as it stands today, we are out and out brokerage, leasing, which is the kind of the mothership, We've then got capital markets, occupier services, and flex. So it's out and out brokerage across 4 different service lines. Team is 25. We've recently launched the marketing department as well, which we've got some pretty big plans for. So that's the current offering. We always said that by the 3rd year, that's when we want to start exploring growth. And it's funny, we've had some, over Christmas, in the lead up to Christmas, we had some really interesting discussions internally, because we've actually now got Compton after 3 years to a point of stabilization. We are an established business with consistent revenue, and the business is, we never take anything for granted for the record, but the business is stable. So we're actually now in a position where if we wanted to, we could kind of chill. And actually the decisions we've been making is, do we stick or do we twist? By sticking, I've got a great lifestyle business. I can earn a really good living. I can do what I want to do. But there are problems with sticking. And there's 2 problems in equal measure. 1, it doesn't satisfy mine and my partner's ambitions. And 2, leading on to your second point, it doesn't allow us to further develop the talent and the ambition of the people within our business. So we've obviously got to a stage where, as I said, it's a stabilized business. We've got a team. Now, we've always had a bottom-up approach to recruitment, barring perhaps heads of department who you have to go and employ, especially if you're launching a new department, where we did with investment with Kyle, occupier services with Dan. But typically speaking, unless there is a special circumstance, we normally go bottom up. So by going bottom up, there's a number of different benefits. And this will hopefully ring true for someone who's obviously in recruitment yourself. Now, if you go and get a school leaver, someone who's 18, you're able to shape that person into the ethos and the culture that you want to. If you get someone who's 28, that might be a lot harder to accomplish. But also by employing someone at that young age, you're building in more trust, more relationship. I mean, no one has ever left any of the businesses we've ever run to join another agency. People have left to go, whether it's client side or into tech or emigrated to another country, but no one's ever left us to go to another agency. And I think that says quite a lot, because what we've always managed to do for all of our members of staff is we've been able to show them not only financial progression in every year they've been with us, even through dark times, we've also shown them progression in terms of their careers. And I guess one of the main driving factors, as I said, behind growing the business further, if I don't grow the business, everyone who's currently in the business is trapped. They're kind of trapped at their level, because the reality is we've got over 50% market share of our market. There's only X amount of investment transactions happening here. So yes, we might have 10% growth or 10% contraction over the next 3 years if we decide to stick, but you're not going to see enough growth that's going to satisfy the ambition and the demands of the people who we've been working with, in some cases for over a decade. So the only option, quite frankly, is to grow the business.
Talk to me about what you look for in those juniors or those entry-level people, because we talk at Rock One about splitting it in terms of 2. One is the behavioural attributes that someone needs to demonstrate, and then the other part is the technical attributes that they need to have to do their job. And that may be a little bit more geared to roles on the principal side, but I assume that you don't put any weighting on someone's technical capability to do deals. You can kind of teach that. You are really honing in and really looking for the behaviours.
It's the person. It's that person showing hunger and ambition. You cannot survive in a Compton environment without ambition and hunger. If you do not have those 2 fundamental elements, you will not last, because it's not possible.
And how do you go about looking and identifying that?
I just think it's gut feeling. It's kind of how people come across in their interviews. It's certain things they say. It's all about gut feeling around the individual, but it's all about the attitude. I don't care if you don't know what a deal is. I don't care if you don't know what the full repair and insurance lease is. All that stuff can be taught. It's about the attitude, the ambition, and the hunger.
Talk to me about the wider office market right now. We've kind of touched on it a little bit, but what's your take? What's your view in that space?
So we've had it pretty hard where we are. I think, I don't know this for a fact, it is a gut feeling, but I do think the Eastern City Fringe District, given its reliance on the tech sector, has probably been through the most challenging of the last 3 years, which again kind of makes me even more super proud, because to have achieved what we've achieved as Compton, navigating through that difficult period is really kind of just astonishing what we've actually, and I say that from a position of pride, not arrogance, by the way. It's kind of, I sometimes have to think to myself, we've just created this during that. If we can survive that, then we can bloody do anything. But I think the market is now finding its feet again, and some. We are, I mean, people talk about a two-tiered market. I think 2 is way short. It is probably 6 or 7 tiers, whether it's a combination of factors, whether it be geography, whether it be quality of asset, whether it be ESG, whether it be pricing. It's a real mixed bag. But what I would say from a positive standpoint, given we were somewhat as an industry in the gutter during March 2020, when basically no one wanted to be in an office, I think if you would have offered anyone the opportunity to be where we are now, when this pandemic started, everyone would have bitten your arm off. So I think the market is strong in a lot of places. It's average in a lot of places, and it's weak in a lot of places. I can't generalize the market, unfortunately, because of the various different components.
It would be remiss of me not to ask around your views on work from home.
Are you not bored of that yet?
I'm not. Can you just give me a little bit of a take? Because I think, I know you speak to the heart of your business and how you see it. And, take the fact that your livelihood is predicated on the office market. Take that out of it. Can you just give me a bit of a view, just from a business perspective, culture perspective?
Absolutely. Listen, people do think I'm incredibly biased. And of course, I can understand why. But if you listen to this podcast, you understand my journey. I started as a 16-year-old who knew nothing. I've kind of gone on to have I'm only about halfway through my career in my eyes, but I'm not there yet. I haven't accomplished what I want to accomplish yet. But I've managed to do that without a degree. But I wouldn't have been able to have done that if I had a work from home kind of policy during my journey. There are two sides to it. One is it's just bad for business, and anyone who argues differently, like it's just bullshit. I'm sorry, it's just absolute rubbish. How can not having your workforce collaborating in an environment, regardless of what you do, not be better for your business than having everyone spread out? There's no argument that I would ever believe in that is the case. The same can be said for career progression. How can you progress your career by not aspiring and being around people you're inspired by or people you can learn from? So whoever wants to bring me an argument that works on that, fine. But I'm not gonna back down. The third part is there is a social responsibility here, genuinely, right? We talk about the infrastructure of the cities that we live in, whether it be how the tube network, the train network, the Italian who owns his deli on the corner, or the sweet shop owner, or the barbers, or if people don't work in city centres, the economic infrastructure that we have all come to become accustomed to and take for granted falls apart, totally falls apart. And there has been evidence of that happening. I mean, the amount of people that I know who ran small businesses, in particular around the Old Street and Short District, that have gone out of business over the last 3 years, it's astonishing, because they relied on office workers being there. So whilst, yes, people may like working from home on a Friday, and by the way, going to play a couple of hours of tennis, walking the dog, having lunch with the wife or the husband, whatever it may be, you're really working a 4-day week. And I do feel that this is the contentious part. Is it working from home, or is it hardly working? I'm not going to put everyone in the same bracket, because I do know people do lots of good work working from home. I mean, listen, people in my business, they will say to me, listen, I've got to get this monster pitch out. I need 5 hours of pure peace and quiet. Do you mind if I go and do it? Of course not. Absolutely not. But it's a work from office first. And if you want to work from home, that's fine. We're not saying you absolutely can't. I've got people with young families, with kids, school plays, this one. So, well, you want to work? Of course. We're not operating a prison system. But this theory where you can have a policy where you're 3 days in and 2 days out, I mean, what a load of shit.
Heard it here. I'm not going to say first. Heard it here again and again and again, multiple times. A question before we come on to our final question is, has your definition of success changed?
No, probably not. I don't think I've got a definition of success, really. I'm not the sort of guy that is trying to get to a place where I've achieved X or Y and now I'm going to retire. I don't think I'll ever retire, if I'm being honest. I'm quite fortunate that I really love what I do. I'm quite fortunate that I'm actually quite good at what I do, which kind of helps. But no, I'm mad ambitious. Like there's not a number or there's not a thing I could do. As I said, the one thing I really want to do, really want to do, as I said to you before, I want to be the CEO of a big business. And that is, there is probably an element of ego there, I'm not going to deny, but there's also a genuine belief that if you, as I said, you take what we've done and you multiply it at scale. And I saw this when I was at Colliers, when I'd spend time at Colliers going to see other people in the business, whether it be a team in Birmingham or a team in Scotland or this one, that one. And I'm kind of just looking at this. I'm thinking, if I just could have just sprinkle the theory and the methodology that we use in our little business, and you sprinkled it on the team there and the team there, you'd transform it. You'd absolutely transform one of these big businesses into something that I don't believe has ever been seen before in London or the UK market.
A question that I ask everyone that comes on the podcast is, if I gave you £500 million worth of capital, who are the people, what property, and which place would you look to deploy that capital?
Good question. So 500 million is quite a lot of money. Right now, this is going to be a plug, but I have to plug it. Right now, I would be probably investing all of my 500 million in the Old Street and Shoreditch district because it's off an incredibly low base. Given the struggles it's had through the pandemic and the reliance on tech, you're at a moment in time, I believe, where the Old Street Shoreditch market is showing outrageous value for money. The problem with that is you need that money to be quite long, not too long, but most people want, if they're buying a building in Old Street Shoreditch, they want the answer there and then within 12 months. I think within the next 5 years, Old Street Shoreditch will not only get back to where it was, it will surpass where it was pre-pandemic.
And if I take you out of that patch?
If you take me out of that patch, I'll probably go West End. If I've got 500 million, I just want it in a safe haven. I'll just stick it in the West End. I know it's a boring answer, but I'm worried about the outskirts of the outskirts.
Yeah.
The Greenwich, Stratford. I think there's a lot of offices out there. There's not a lot of demand. That's not a picture that I think is going to change very soon. Well,
Shaun, you've had a phenomenal background, an amazing career. And, I have every confidence that one day you will be a chief exec of a big global business.
Maybe you'll find me the role at some point in my future.
I would love to oblige you with that honour. So excited to see what you and the Compton team go on to do over 2024 and beyond.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the People, Property, Place podcast. If you found it insightful, feel free to share it with a friend or colleague. Give us a rating, like, or comment. It helps tremendously. It'd be great to hear from you on LinkedIn. I'm super open-minded to recommendations of guests that we should have on the show or areas of the market we should explore further. So do drop me a message. The People, Property, Place podcast is powered by Rockborn. The team recruit leadership and future leadership hires for real estate owners, funds, investors, and developers. So if you're looking to hire top talent for your business, head over to the website www.rockborn.com, where you'll be able to find a wealth of information, or feel free to drop me a message on LinkedIn. Have a great day wherever you are, and I look forward to catching you